Welcome to C-Files, folks. Thanks for joining me. I'm really focused on the riots in Southern California because I did a career in law enforcement there, and I still have close friends, church members that I attended church with, people that I care and love about, neighbors that I care and love about that are still there living in Southern California. And so far, there's not been any issues with their safety. But the problem with these riots and these protests is that if you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, you can find yourself suddenly in a really bad situation. No fault of your own. You're just going about your own business, and doing your thing through your day, all the errands and the work and things that you have to do, and suddenly you find yourself at some intersection somewhere in the middle of a bunch of these rioters surrounding your car and endangering your life. And that's my concern. I don't think that La Raza will ever be successful in overtaking the United States. I think that's pretty much an impossible goal that they have. At least they actually don't even want to take up the whole United States, just the southwestern United States, because they've been taught some things in their worldview and in history that has really distorted their thinking. But beyond that is also, the rich white kids that have gone to the universities in California, which are really radical in what they do. What they teach is very radical. And they're out there protesting as well, but you can't really call it a protest when it becomes violent. It's not a protest any longer. When you're burning vehicles, you're looting stores, and you're threatening the lives of law enforcement officers, whether it be federal or local or state, and threatening the lives of their families, that's no longer a protest. Those are acts of violence, and they're also interfering and delaying with the legitimate and legal operations of law enforcement officers who are doing what they're sworn to do, and that is to enforce the law and carry out the law. Now, they don't make the laws, they just enforce them. If a law is written and there's no way to enforce that law, then the law has no teeth and it's really not worth the paper that it's written upon. So you have to have the ability to enforce a law before it actually has any teeth to it. So that's important. And so if we have immigration laws that are not being enforced, then what good are the laws? Got a state trooper running the lights here. I think he's about to go after somebody. He kept going straight. Okay. Anyway, so these riots and this interference is in many ways an insurrection. It's illegal. They're committing crimes. Got a sheriff coming up on me. Yeah, the sheriffs out here don't really care too much about doing traffic stops. They're more interested in uh, drug bust and arrest and things like that. So they do a good job. The sheriffs here do a really good job in this county. But anyway, so that's where it is. And the president of Mexico, I saw her on that. You have to go to places like X to actually find this stuff because they never put it on the mainstream media. But she was calling for these rioters to ramp it up. And typically what happens when you have these type of things is that you have the leaders, the ones that are they're the instigators. They're the ones that organize it, plan it, do the tactics and the strategy for it, and then they get the ideologues to come along. And that's usually the rich white kids that have been indoctrinated into communism. and they're just like sheep, following and thinking that they're involved in some great movement and they're doing some great thing, and youth and foolishness, they go hand in hand, I tell you. But wisdom is wasted on the old. You live most of your life and you come to the point of where you actually start to gain a little bit of wisdom. But then you're too old to really do anything. So, but anyway, that's typically how that works. The car that's off on the side. So, they're not going to win this. We've seen this before. Blocking the freeway, burning the cars, and those lithium-ion batteries, they're going to burn for days. They're not going to. This is not going to be a simple, okay, overnight, burn the car, it's done. When they're burning those cars with lithium batteries, oh my goodness, that's a bad fire, and they're hard to put out. The fire department had to come up with a special method of trying to put out those lithium batteries when they catch fire. They're not easy to put out at all. But anyway, the cities around the country will start getting ramped up on this if they don't quell it in Los Angeles in short order. You'll see Atlanta, Chicago, New York. They tried in New York, got shut down really fast. Kudos to New York PD that really shut down the protest, the riot there. They were trying to. They're at a federal facility, an ICE facility, and they were trying to prevent a vehicle from coming out, and trying to surround it and do what they do, threaten the driver and all this. And NYPD came in and just completely devastated that attempt and to shut them down like that. If the mayor of Los Angeles would just release her officers and let them do their job, the protests, all that rioting and all of that stuff would be over by tomorrow. LAPD would shut it down in a heartbeat. They all these reports about, we're overwhelmed. Yeah, they're shorthanded. They should have 10,000 officers. They have like 8,500. But they can still get the job done. We were always shorthanded in San Diego. I was in the middle of riots in San Diego, and a part of trying to shut them down. And we were able to do it. Even shorthanded, we were able to do it. There's ways to do it, and it's highly effective. So I consider at this point, because the mayor of Los Angeles, I can never remember her name, and Governor Gavin Newsom of California, because they are siding with the insurrectionists against the American people and against the federal government. I consider both of them to be enemies of the United States. And I believe that if they don't watch their rhetoric, they could end up being in trouble. I know Newsom wants to get a mugshot because he thinks it's going to help him to win the presidency in the next round. He thinks, I'll get all the Democrat votes if I get a mugshot of Trump, the Trump administration, DOJ arresting me, then I'll win the primary. Yeah, you'll win the primary, but you'll lose the election. Because in 4 years, the ability to cheat in those elections, if Trump gets his way, will be shut down. So, I think, I don't know, we'll have to wait and see as more resources go in. Of course, the National Guard is not able to do a whole lot. They can be protective services, but they're not sworn, and they're not trained to go in and make arrests and to quell riots. They're not riot control. They don't do that. If the Marines went in, which that's the only branch of the military that's allowed to do that under constitutional law. They're not trained in that either. They're war fighters. My phone keeps dipping down. They're war fighters. They're trained to fight wars and kill people and take territory. They're not trained in law enforcement functions. What they need is a mass presence of law enforcement that has the authority and the training and the ability to make the arrest and shut it down. And as you remember, in Seattle, as soon as Seattle PD was given the green light to go in and end that summer of love, or whatever they called it, where they occupied several city blocks of Seattle. As soon as Seattle PD was given the authorization to go in and clean that mess out, it was done within 2 days. So, yeah, this attempt by these young folks is going to fail. And then once everything settles down, what will happen next? Well, you will see. Well, I don't know. The news won't report it because, they're in on it too. Just like the crooked politicians, they're in on it also. But what you will see is that they will be arrested and charged with federal crimes. And some of them will go to prison. And I don't know if they understand that or realize that. Like I said, young and foolish, and they don't understand the consequences. That's one of the big problems. People don't understand consequences today, that there are actually consequences for your actions. Political operatives, these elected officials who thought they could get away with whatever they want, they're starting to learn that there's consequences for your actions. When they deceive the American people and then mandate things on the American people that they should have never mandated because it's not legal, and now the boomerang is coming back on them and it's starting to hit them upside the head. No one is above the law. All of these politicians that were breaking the law and looking at Trump and saying, no one's above the law, Trump did this and Trump did that. Well, guess what? All of their shenanigans are being exposed, and they're finding out that they're not above the law either. They thought they were because they thought they had the political machine on their side that would protect them. But it's all falling apart, folks. And this attempt is, they're scared because they don't want to go back to to their country of origin, because they know they've committed crimes there and they're going to be in big trouble when they get there. And so they're in LA rioting and fighting and calling for insurrection against the United States. Have you heard the speeches that they've made? The president of Mexico calling for them to ramp it up. And then the speeches that they were giving in LA, these activists, they were calling for violence against the United States, against citizens, against federal law enforcement officers. They're not nice people. They're not gonna come and cut your grass for you or bring you a meal when you're homesick. That's not the type of people these people are. They're very, very selfish. And so that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. All right. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys know this. But I just thought I'd reiterate it. Thanks for watching. I gotta go take care of something. God bless.